Good day, everybody. Welcome to 2022. 2021 was a bit of a mess. Peak conventions have started up again. There was an article that I did for Flera, and at the end of 2021, it's finally coming to what I feel is a close. Back in 2019 or early 2020, things started to close down for COVID-19, conventions and other things such as that. Over the course of the 2 years, there was an article on Flera, which you can find a link in the description below, basically stating like which conventions were closed, which were delaying, and et cetera, et cetera. Some of the conventions started to open up in the later part of 2021, and thusly, because conventions are at least attempting to make a startup again, I think that the article, which we were using to kind of keep track of closings and delays in convention attendance, will probably be ending this year. So basically, now it's just going to be a historical record of all the conventions that were impacted by the coronavirus. In essence, we've made it through big things, but we're still not through the entire thing yet, as Omicron, as if I'm pronouncing that right. My Greek is a little rusty, but like if the Omicron variant has come and things, and so it leaves the question marks for 2022. But I will say this, if conventions start closing or canceling or delaying, I think that it will probably warrant a separate article, since the article that was written back in March of 2020 at this point has a bit of outdated information about, the initial, issues surrounding the coronavirus pandemic when it was at its infancy. So it'd probably be better to make an update article with like the new stuff that came around and then have a new list of any conventions that are canceling or shuttering because of this new variant, if that does come to pass. One of the good news is about the particular Omicron variant is that it's less lethal than its ancestors, than its Delta and its the novel variants, the first variant and the second variant. As evolution happens, viruses do tend to become less lethal over time rather than more lethal over time, and the reason that happens is because asymptomatic, like if something is having symptoms, then people know that person is sick, and so people tend to quarantine much more readily if there's more symptoms than if there's less symptoms or less severe symptoms. So basically, over time, if a virus wants to expand faster and further, basically it will eventually fade into a less lethal variant, because a host can't spread to another host if the host is dead, right? We're basically carriers, right, of this thing, and if the carrier gets sick or gets ill or dies, these kind of things can't spread as fast as if they're that. So that's the good news. The bad news, obviously, is if it mutates again, and if it mutates to a more lethal variant. But luckily for us, we don't have this isn't the game pandemic for Steam, right? And, since this isn't the pandemic game for Steam, you don't have some psychopathic human behind the keyboard, trying to reach for the extinction of humanity. Viruses don't think that way. They can hardly think at all, if anything. They don't move, they don't mutate in certain ways just to mess with people. They mutate for survivability and to spread easily, right? Which is why Omicron is a very easily spreadable. It has a bigger, what they call an R value, a larger vector, and is able to spread faster. But at the same time, it's less lethal, which means that it makes it easier to spread, even more so because people who are asymptomatic could be carriers. People who are vaccinated could be carriers and have less symptoms. So if Omicron continues on its path, my guess is that for the year of 2022, conventions are mostly going to probably be more active, and they might have rules regarding vaccination status. Not because they like to socially, politically control what people do with their lives, but mostly for liability purposes and basically protecting, trying to act in like the best interest of their attendees, right? That's probably how they will say it. Obviously, there's going to be people with political disagreements on that, but that's just basically how it is. Basically, they're going to say that people who are vaccinated in this can come to the attendance because they don't want people to come to the convention and risk death over it, right? Because we don't want to lose people. And that's basically probably what they're going to be basing their decision on. Obviously, there's going to be people who disagree, as noted before. So, that being said, how will this impact conventions going into 2022? So that means we're going to go back to our big old chart, our big old thing. So we're going to go to the spreadsheet for the rest of this thing. So I'm going to guess that things are going to come back to normal. I think that all the big 8 and all the things that I keep track of are probably going to hold conventions in 2022, barring that worst case scenario where we get another variant that is more lethal. But basically, if it's not like Omicron can transform instantaneously into a new variant would have to start somewhere and spread just as like any other variant does. But obviously, with more spreading means more chances for mutation, right? So, worst case scenario could happen. Really hoping it doesn't. I'm really hoping that we get back on it and we get things going. So, still maintain, still try to make it so that you're not spreading things as fast as try to, keep from spreading, your substances all over random strangers, right? As frustrated as it is, if you've caught it and you're like, F the world and I'm going to sneeze on somebody, don't do that. I've seen someone on Twitter say that, and like, don't do that, please. Like, because that is like the concept and the idea of if I'm sick and I'm hurt, everybody else should be sick and hurt is basically the foundations of authoritarianism, right? If I fail, everyone else should fail. If I fall, society should fall. That's, that try to avoid that mentality. Try to keep a stiff upper lip and we'll get through this thing. So let's go to the numbers, because I like to distract myself with numbers when things are weird, okay? So let's do that. We're gonna get over here and we'll see what we got. So I have not updated all of 2021 as of yet, and I'm going to do this live because we may as well. Our top 8 conventions here, and they're still retaining their top 8 status because, coronavirus. I'm not going to shift them from these until we get a year where everyone's active. I don't want to shift people from the top 8 position. So if there was a convention that had more than the top 8 when we're not really fully up and running yet, I'm not really going to count it because it's not really fair to that. So we're just going to maintain these 8 as a tracking mechanism until we have a year of fully things, and hopefully that year is going to be 2022. As you can see, Further Confusion was the last one in 2021 we were able to record. That was done in January of 2020 before everything shut down. So just to kind of recall, everything in black here is based on just basically copy pasting the numbers from the prior year to say no growth. That's how I'm handling the corona closures. And so right here we see we have basically we have items in red here that are estimates. And so we have Midwest Fur Fest and we have Biggest Little Fur Con. Now I will note this, Biggest Little Fur Con has not released any numbers. And I'm glad that I am not the only one who kind of noticed this, because Midwest Fur Fest announced their numbers, and when Midwest Fur Fest announced their numbers within like a few days, basically they gave a tentative number, which is great. It's fine. You can adjust it later as more information comes in. Like it's fine. It's not a sin to change things based on when more data comes in, as much as you think it is a sin. And so like basically, Midwest Fur Fest released its tentative numbers. And we're going to look at that one now and to update our chart. So my estimate was 8,801 right here. That was based upon this multiple down here, which is basically a corona recover percentage. How I was able to obtain this number was based on one attribute. That is, Megaplex's numbers were officially 2,889, which I covered in August of 2021 after Megaplex had happened. Here we see the difference between these two things. So we divide the number of we divide the current number by the old number here, and then we get the percentage of what percentage of this is this. So it's 79%. So about 80% of people who showed up in 2019 showed up in 2021. Now, obviously, it's not a one-to-one set. There could be new people, and there could be people who were in here, not in here. But basically, at the end of the day, only 80% of the people who attended in 2019 attended in 2021. Because we're still in the midst of a pandemic, and there was still uncertainty, and I think people were still recovering. So we take that percentage, and that's the percentage that I applied to 2020 for those going to be open, and that was the estimates there. So we now have a new number, so we got to update that number, and then we've got to update our corona percentage. So how we do that is I'm going to take a look at that number. So let's bring up that number, please. Our preliminary numbers are astounding. 8,900 attendees. Final numbers at a later date. And what's that? Some random tweet about a guy who says, "Oh, hey, look, who releases attendance numbers within days of the con? Biggest little fur con." Well, they said it, not me, so I'm good. I already wrote a whole article about that before coronavirus. It was called "Ghosting the Attendees," and I still call it that. Basically, where a convention holds their attendance numbers because they think numbers are popularity or something, or they have some sort of social political problem with numbers, which annoys me, honestly. And I basically ranted about that in that article. I'll put a link to that article in the description below. But basically, this isn't the first time Biggest Little Fur Con has done this. Like they did it in 2019 as well. It was like pulling teeth, and I still don't have numbers as far as I can tell for 2021. So I don't know if they have some sort of issue with attendance numbers or if there's some actual legitimate logistics reason for them not doing it. Trying not to make assumptions, but it seems kind of weird that so 8,900, that's within 99 off. That's pretty dang good. That's between 1% and 2% accuracy. That's pretty dang good, man. So we're gonna change this to 88900, and we're gonna make this into non-estimated. So we're gonna change the text color. This is gonna be still estimated because, hey, it's pretty accurate. So that's probably how many people showed up. So if they don't release an official number, the number is 4,636. So you can't just make numbers up. Sorry. Like, if you're not going to give me actual numbers to work with, human beings are going to treat you like an invisible stare and work around you. I'm sorry. That's just how the world works. Sorry. Not sorry, I guess. So here we go. So the next thing here is, you notice that this percentage didn't change. And so what we've got to do is we've got to add this adjustment. So I think that was a little more. So it's probably, this number percentage here is probably going to go up to probably about 80 point something percent. That's my guess. But let's actually take the maths here. And we're going to take this, we're going to add L9 to that. we're going to add M8 to this. And then we're going to add L8 to this to give us total percentages of both conventions. Hey! Look at that. 80.55%. So it only went up by like 1 percentage point. I was right. It's when you work with numbers for a long time, you start to get a feel for them. It's feeling the numbers, as it were. So here we have that. So now the corona coverage is 80%. So I think if I undo, I think you can see the numbers adjust in real time. So you see how the numbers in 2022 and 20 thing adjusted in real time. So they didn't adjust by much. So like it was by about less than 100 apiece in essence. So basically here we have our new numbers for 2022. And so if Anthrocon comes back online, we're going to see about 7,500. That's my estimate. Biggest Little Fur Con. Unfortunately, this is an estimate of an estimate, so it's probably going to be less accurate. Thank you, Biggest Little Fur Con. So 3,500, right? And if, by the way, if they are worried about growth things, because here's the thing, like I think one of the reasons, and this is, I don't want to speculate because if I speculate, I'm going to get in trouble again. But if you notice, Biggest Little Fur Con here had like such high growth in the early parts, and then it started to taper off. I think that there was an expectation of infinite growth, and that just doesn't happen. And most normal people, understand that. But there's some people who are psychotic and think that just because growth continues in one direction means that it'll always continue. So if they did suffer a loss of attendance, like that can harm it. But to be fair, and why this speculation is probably wrong, is coronavirus is a pretty dang good excuse, right? If some of the investors like, hey, look, you lost attendees here from when you last held a convention, it's like, yeah, we're dealing with a corona. We're dealing with a freaking virus right now. Can you get off our backs, right? But unfortunately, some furries like to avoid conflict, so they probably, I don't know, speculatory. But anyways, enough worrying about this number. Let's actually look at the numbers we got. So Eurofriends had 3,412. So with an 80% recovery, we're looking at 2,748. Eurofriends, this one is actually more up in the air because this is where it gets into social political things. And when we're talking about Germany and how they would deal with coronavirus versus the United States, will they allow people to have conventions next year? Obviously, America has this whole kind of live and let die sort of element to it. Not as bad as Russia does, but like it does have that sort of element to it. And so basically you have this situation where this it might still be closed. And if it's closed, we're just going to move anything that gets closed this year, we'll just have like the numbers copied over for next year, previously. And then we'll estimate next year just as normal. Furry Fiesta, we're estimating 3,902. This one's going to be early on this year. Given Omicron is starting to cause some concerns, this one is also kind of a question mark. Same with Further Confusion. Further Confusion being in California, more likely if something goes wrong and we're going to have to start delaying conventions, it's probably going to happen with Further Confusion. I know some individuals on Twitter who have noted that they're not going to Further Confusion, even though they were planning on going. And I think that person was from Austria or Germany, so they were a foreign traveler. So there'll definitely be impacts on that. Midwest Fur Fest, if we continue to have that percentage recovery. But here's the interesting thing with these two. And this is something that I think these two are not going to be as accurate. Because the interesting thing is that there's a bunch of variables this year, which is why I have to talk at length. Because you think about it, it's like these two are going to be starting off from ground zero. So if they're going to take the brunt, they're probably going to take the full brunt, right? So they're probably these ones that were closed in 2021 having a percentage recovery of this, probably more accurate. This one, however, these two are pulling from these, which are actually a percentage of a percent, right? So these ones are a percentage of a static number that occurred in 2019 for the most part, except for this one. These two down here and this one up here, these are based on estimate. This one's based on an estimate of an estimate, but this one's a percentage of that percentage and not that percentage, in essence. So I may have to, on the fly here, adjust how I'm estimating these things and basically base these ones off of this number rather than this number. Because, and this is where the feeling thing comes into play. It's kind of a muddy thing, but I mean, this one I think is far more accurate because these numbers static, right? Whereas these are declining because of that percentage. So basically, I'm taking a percentage of a percentage. So I need to think of maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe it should be something along the lines of we're going to do M7, right? Oh, not M7. Or sorry, L8, M8 or L8. We're moving one left. Right, so this number here, even that might be wrong. So this is where it gets a little weird because I don't know whether or not that's true or not. I'm going to guess, and Midwest Fur Fest is actually really, really, is really up in the air because it really depends on the scenarios I talked about earlier, whether coronavirus grows or whether it declines, right? Or whether there's that mutation or not. If it is, then it could be basically shut down again at worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that, we're going through the thing, we're finally reaching the end curve of and basically coronavirus gets into a endemic phase where we're living amongst it now and we're adapting to living amongst it. And that to me is the best case scenario. It's what about if it just disappears? At this point, if we've had 2 years to try to, fight it out, and people are politically not getting and people are politically following different things, you're going to get a middling result, right? So to my opinion, that's the best case scenario, is that it goes into the endemic phase, and it's just another disease that we have to worry about amongst us, in a way. Super sus. So that would be that. I think I like that number better than that number. But as we get to I think the problem is that this was based on one variable and now I have to develop a second variable, and I think that's going to be in prior years, I was guessing based upon the delta and just saying that the delta would continue in that direction. Whereas this one is a dip, but I know it's probably going to recover more. So basically, it's a number between here and here, but it's not necessarily back to the full. That's my guess. And unfortunately, how do I make that into a mathematical formula? That's the trickiest thing, because it's you could base your rhetoric, and I could just throw I could say 10,000 or 9,500, but then I'm just throwing darts at a board, right? There's no method or madness to it. So basically what you would probably want to do is take the delta between 2018 and 2019 and implement it into the 2020 thing. So we can do something like plus, or actually this one we can just say, actually yeah, that's probably better. Let's just do that. So we're going to use the same formula that we used in the past. Doing it live, man, I'm sorry everyone. I just maybe I should have thought of this before I recorded it. But it's good to see these kind of things in real time so you can see the thought process while it's happening. And if you're a nerd and you're stuck around this long, you're probably interested in that kind of a thing. So you're weird and I'm weird and we're both weird together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I did in the past, and that is I'm going to adjust these so that it's this plus the previous growth metric. And I'm going to do and instead I'm going to add a weird caveat to it, and then I'm going to do the last growth metric, which was when coronavirus wasn't existing. So I'm going to take their number for this year, for that year, and I'm going to add the delta between there and there. So in order to do that, we do have the delta between here and here. So what I'm going to do, you see the deltas here. You can see them here. We don't have deltas here because they were never open, but you see the negative deltas here. And this is an actual delta now, so we can make that into blank. So what I'm going to do is instead of using these deltas, I'm going to use these deltas. So I'm going to take biggest little FurCon here and adjust it by 369. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2021, which is M3, and we're going to add to it. We're not even going to take the corona recovery percentage anymore for that. We're going to take the delta for that. So that for that year it is J15. So my estimate is 5,044. That seems a lot better. Fumbling with numbers with Tantru. Anyways, L8. So this one, same thing, same deal. I need to take the so Midwest Fur Fest had a delta of 30. So we're going to take this one's probably a low ball, but I'm fine with doing low ball right now. So we're gonna do M8, and we're gonna add J20 to that. And we get 8,930. That's, as I said, probably low ball. Because there was a tapering off of growth for Midwest Fur Fest. I think it was reaching a saturation point. Similar to how Biggest Little FurCon sort of is not kind of reaching a saturation point, but not really. So the deltas here are just so you know, the change in numbers, basically. The difference between X and Y. So between 2017 and 2018, you know, Further Confusion lost 100 attendees. Everyone else gained X amount. And that's how you can tell. Et cetera, et cetera. Nerd. So basically, we're going to do the same thing with this guy, but we're going to take M9 and we're going to add J21. J21. 3,904. So my projections for this year, look at this mess. Look at this spaghetti mess of a chart now. It used to be a nice smooth curve up until 2019 where it started to taper off, and then 2020 just like spaghetti. All this, look at these. Anyways, what you got here is the projection for 2022. Midwest Fur Fest, it looks like it's going to be a little bit stagnant. You know, Anthrocon's going to be in the recovery phase. So basically, even though, and I'm not going to count, as I said, I'm not going to count this as officially Anthrocon surpassing Midwest Fur Fest, but its estimated number is obviously static. If it was held that year, it probably would have been much lower because of the coronavirus. So, you know, there's certain ones on this line that are going to be estimated, and some of them are going to be static. So you're going to have anything that's sort of flatlined here didn't technically move positions. So, you know, 2021 is just going to be a big old freaking mess. 2020, you know, it was a mess, but it was a mess for mostly everybody except for Further Confusion. Further Confusion was the only one who moved in 2020. Everyone else remained flatlined. So what it looks like, according to these estimates, which are very tentative, more so than ever, is that, you know, Midwest Fur Fest will start up, and Anthrocon might start up, but it might lose a percentage. We'll have more information that might show a bigger recovery percentage, and that will adjust any of these numbers that had any of these guys in there. to see how much percentage they get back. But I don't think it's going to be fully in the 2019 numbers. So, as you can see, biggest little FurCon dips, kind of comes back. Eurofence kind of, actually that's Furry Weekend Atlanta sort of dips. Interesting, Furry Weekend Atlanta and them were kind of neck and neck, like right up to the coronavirus. So it's interesting in that regard. And I kind of remember saying, will 2020 be the year that, Midwest, it's back in the day, I was like, will Midwest will Furry Weekend in Atlanta be the one that surpasses Biggest Little Fur Con, will become the third largest furry convention in Georgia, in the United States. And unfortunately for them, we have that situation going on there, and we had coronavirus, and so Weekend Furry Atlanta hasn't really had an in-person convention since then. So and this is what this is mostly is like. We have obviously we have virtual conventions, which, by the way, I hope that there's at least a handful of virtual conventions that remain in operation for even past the coronavirus, because I think that it's important that that these kind of things are disseminated and that furry conventions can be enjoyed by people even if they can't afford to go onto a large expensive trip to these large institutions and large hotels and things like that. And I think that's important, and I hope that does continue to be a thing. But obviously there's a bunch of extroverts out there that don't want virtual conventions replacing actual conventions, but I don't think they can. I honestly don't. Even as somebody who's a hermit, even as somebody who's introverted myself, I don't think that the demand for the virtual world will ever surpass the necessity of interaction in the real world. I don't think that'll ever be a thing. Honestly, even though I think it's going to be an important part of reaching an audience that you normally wouldn't. I don't think that's why I make YouTube videos, right? Because it can reach a wider audience than if I sit down in a panel room somewhere. Honestly, so most of the panels I ran have only had like less people in it than I've had views on any of my YouTube videos, even maybe my worst ones. Not a lot of people interested in nonfiction, because a lot of people are busy living their lives while I'm busy documenting a bunch of interesting things about like this kind of stuff. So, anyways, I think that'll do it for now. I think I'm satisfied with the numbers for next year. I think that these look rather good as tentative things. I think this one's probably the most off, given the numbers. I think everyone else I'm rather comfortable with having those as the numbers that I'm estimating. This one might also be an underestimation for Eurofence, because Europe has like really been under lockdown. I'm pretty sure they're very thirsty for getting out there and doing things, unlike in the U.S. where we've already had a few things, kind of do that. Also, I think that not only coronavirus, I think, and this is another sort of caveat, is that I think inflation and things like that, and demand and supply issue of being able to travel and being able to afford these kind of things is also going to impact people's ability to go, even if they are vaccinated and even if they are those things. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. I don't think it'll get back to 2019 numbers anytime soon. It may take a few years to do so. So let's actually take a look. Have any of them reached the 2019 numbers yet? It looks like my estimate is that Megaplex will actually get beyond their 2019 numbers should things keep going fine. It looks like every other one, though, does not show that. So we'll see if Megaplex surpasses 2019. If that's definitely going to be newsworthy, because that'll definitely be something to show that we're starting to make our way past the corona crash, as it were, and starting to get into recovery mode, if the estimate for Megaplex is correct, which is based upon the delta here applied to here. Though obviously there's a lot of resistance, it may not reach it. It may be just basically 3,617. But that's why these are good faith estimates. These are good faith estimates. I try to estimate best as I can based on the feelings of things. And as you saw earlier, pretty darn accurate sometimes. It was scary. I was 1% off. That's pretty dang good. And that was just the number I threw together, just going, well, we have a percentage recovery thing, and now we have a number we can use to make a basis case. And then it's like, oh, that was actually pretty good. Hopefully, we'll see how accurate those are in the next videos. So we'll see you after Further Confusion has their convention. We'll see if we reach the 3,632. We'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure, if you like this kind of eccentrically nerdy content, kick that like, kick the subscribe button, and kick a comment in the comment section. Hopefully 2022 will be an interesting year and an year of recovery, and maybe I could do things. I did 22 articles for Flayrah in 2022 or 2021. So I almost had. So I guess we're gonna do 2023 this time, or 23 articles in 2022. I don't know. My goal is 30, I think. So we're going to leave it at that. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.